100 years ago, Congress passed the 18th Amendment, which prohibited the sale and consumption of alcohol. This led to, it's already happening. This led to a rise in organized crime as criminals saw opportunity to hoard alcohol and sell it at a tremendous profit. This included ringleaders, such as Al Capone, who made millions of dollars from his casinos and speakeasies selling illegal alcohol. Millions of speakeasies, these secret bars, opened up in cities across the United States during Prohibition era. And people at home made their own alcohol in bathtubs and stills, and really unsafe. The transportation of alcohol became known as bootlegging during that time, which was a very popular crime, I guess you could call it. And then in 1933, Prohibition was finally repealed with the 21st Amendment after public opinion swayed and people thought that politicians were hypocrites, which they are. I'm rambling now. But this all goes to say that my claim is that prohibition of any substance, drugs, alcohol, is ultimately ineffective and only makes a situation more dangerous. I will go about explaining my argument 3 ways. 1, that prohibition causes violence both in our cities, on our borders, that black markets ultimately render prohibition ineffective because people get what is prohibited anyway, just more dangerously. And then finally, that the legality of drugs in this case, which I'll get to in a minute, is ultimately safer as people can seek treatment and, All right, so first, the prohibition makes cities and borders more dangerous. The drug war started in the 70s with the Nixon administration, and now it is known for its high rates of gang violence. Quote, illicit drug proceeds fuel gangs, and fighting over turf is the driving factor of gang violence. The government estimates 2,000 deaths per year due to gang violence, which is much higher than, say, mass shootings, which is only 30 to 40 people a year normally. Second, black markets render the drug war ineffective. Black markets form when there is a vacuum created by the government by saying, you cannot sell this, but people want it, so there is still a demand even though there is no legal supply. So it'll happen anyway. Therefore, the prices are not checked, the product is not checked. There's a lack of purity, a lack of potency, and you don't really know what you're getting if you're going through a black market to get what you want. But if you really want it, you're going to get it anyway, or try to, at least. The White House estimated that in 2012, $100 billion in product was sold by illegal drug sales. Thirdly, the legality of drugs is safer ultimately to the public than the prohibition of drugs. With legality, it is easier to open medical clinics where people who are ashamed of their addiction can come in and get treatment without fear of repercussion or incarceration. After Colorado legalized marijuana, the Boston Globe wrote, and I quote, legalization has ushered in thousands of jobs. The drug is regulated, and it is required to have its potency tested, and is also tested for contaminants. These things alone make drugs more safe than they were before they were strictly prohibited and would be after. To reiterate, it is my claim that prohibition of drugs is ineffective and ultimately leads to violence. Thank you.
All right, two back to back. Proposition's clear, but you do have two parts on it, so that's a little bit awkward. There's a good preview of what the secondary point is. The explanation of bootlegging and prohibition as background is attention device. I thought that was perfectly fine. You set up the controversy reasonably well. Like I said, you had a pretty solid preview of what the supporting points are. So structurally, you're okay at the beginning. Delivery is a little bit problematic. I wasn't sure if it was an anxiety issue that caused you for the slang term for fecal matter in the opening sentence of your speech. You probably want to be a little bit more careful about that. It felt a little bit maybe like you needed some more rehearsal and maybe a little bit more confidence. I understand sometimes it's a little nerve-inducing to be speaking in front of an audience, but it's just us. It's the same folks that are here every day, and we all want to do a good job. We want to help you guys, so don't be intimidated by the friendly faces here. By the way, friendly faces, you do know that you're not supposed to be using your phones during people's speeches, right? If you're doing it between people's speeches while I'm talking, I'm still not thrilled about it, but if you're doing it while your classmates are speaking, that's an issue, okay? So make sure that you're paying attention to your classmates. If I didn't say that before, I'm saying it now. I think, you've got the supporting points are fine, but you need a lot more information on the individual points to support those positions. The number of deaths, for instance, that you talk about that are gang-related, the assumption that they are all drug-based gang-related deaths, I think, is perhaps a little overdone here. I'm not suggesting that there's not a substantial part of that is true, but you I think are making a very broad generalization from that piece of information, and you got to be careful about that. The amount of drugs that are sold in the country, that's a nice piece of factual data that you've got there. However, what would the amount be if they were legal, and how many more people would be using it? I think those are problems. And it's kind of an interesting dilemma that you set up for yourself, an acknowledgement on the third point that people have problems with drugs, because that's why we want them to be able to have access to rehab and get over their shame and all that sort of thing. At the same time, suggesting that prohibition is the source of the problems rather than the drug use being the source of the problems. So I think you're going to need a little bit more information on each of those points to sustain the position that you're taking there. A couple of delivery things. You want to get your hand out of the pockets. You want to kind of look up at us more. I know you stumble a couple of times, but the truth of the matter is none of that was really very noticeable. You just need to keep kind of going when you hit a dry spot. And for the most part, you did okay on that. But like I said, I think the bigger problem is the lack of evidence, and then there are some assumptions here that probably need a little bit more development. All right, thank you.